Pick up your gear and open your chests. Throw on your armor and head out on a quest. Hey, hey, it's a brand new day. On the Sword Coast, your allies will help with blades and bows and magic as well. Hey, hey, heroes on their way. Fighting forever against overwhelming odds. Fighting together in favor of multiple gods. Idle champions of the forgotten realms. Idle champions, adventure never ends. Idle champions, hit you while I'm there. Idle champions, you will say it again. Idle champions. From Waterdeep to Icewind, head out the shelf, all Shadowfell, hey, hey. Together we stay. Walk to the monsters, walk to the boss, walk to the right, it's never a loss, hey, hey. Bad guys to slay. Fighting forever against overwhelming odds. Fighting together in favor of multiple gods. Idle champions of the forgotten realms. Idle champions, adventure never ends. Idle champions, hit you while I'm dead. Idle champions, you will say it again. Idle champions.
Hello, everybody. I saw somebody talking about echoing, and I'm like, am I echoing? Do I have something playing? I don't think so. Welcome to Gaarawarr's Guide, the tutorial show. I'm Gaarawarr. And joining me today is Martin. Martin's going to be doing all the production stuff and the moderation stuff, so, if you have questions about, playing Idle Champions, or you have questions about today's topic, you can throw them into chat at any time. However, this is the tutorial show. That means for the first hour, I'm going to be talking on the topic, and then the second hour, I will do the questions. So know that your question, as long as you put question : in front of it, Martin will grab it. It won't be lost. I will get to it in the second half of the show. Today's topic is tanking. It's Gaarawarr's Guide to Tanking Revisited. I feel like one of the very first topics we ever covered on this tutorial show, multiple years ago when we first started now. Was tanking. And then we, at the beginning of this year, we hopped back in and we talked because a lot of new tanks had come out. We talked about it again. But then for whatever reason, that video, that VOD never made it to YouTube. So it's like, it felt like, okay, well, we could talk about it again. Yeah. So we're talking about it again, so that people have a more modern VOD that they can reference. And hey, it's always good. It's always a good time to talk about tanks, because tanking is one of those things where when you first start the game, a lot of people, I won't say a lot of people. Let's say some new players don't really understand, like, what the purpose of tanks is. Like, what is a tank? Not just what looks like a tank, but what actually is a tank, and what do they serve? What purpose do they serve? So that's what we're going to dive into today. I've thrown some tanks. I've thrown, some tanks out here. We're gonna we'll go through. We'll hit kind of all of the tanks lightly. I'm not going to go into everything that every tank brings to the game and how to use them. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about like all of their general stuff. All their general stuff. Let's just get past a Sarah rack and then we'll dive in. Because he's going to make things tough. He's going to make things a little tough. So first off, let's talk about the formation. A lot of times people refer to this front column. These are all columns. There are 4 columns in this specific formation. This is the Wild Beyond the Witchlight campaign. Every campaign and every campaign has a unique formation layout. It can either be a 1 tank layout, a 2 tank layout, or a 3 tank layout. That's all we've seen so far. And when we say that 1, 2, or 3 tank layout, what we're actually talking about is the number of available slots in the first column. This is generally referred to as the tanking column. I try to catch myself when I'm talking about the game lately because because there are times where this isn't where the tanks go. But 99% of the time, this is where the tanks go. So, it's fair to call this the tanking column. Just know that, you don't always need tanks. And tanks don't always need to be in the front. It's important to understand that. When you're starting out, tanks in the front makes a lot of sense. And is necessary. When you're pushing, like when you're killing as quickly as I am here, tanks aren't necessary, right? And there are people that start playing the game and they just throw in a bunch of champions and they push until things touch their formation and kill them, and then they figure, oh, that's my wall, and they stop. But because they don't know that they could go further if they had a tank. So what's a tank look like? Let's take a look at Nayeli. Nayeli is the first tank you get in the game. Nayeli is one of your core champions. I have her in a bit of a champion skin here. Here's her regular skin for recognition purposes. Although I feel like she always looks like herself, but This is Nayeli. What you want to do when you're looking at a champion to determine what they do in the game, click on their portrait. This brings up what I refer to as the champ UI. Over here under roles, this is the role that CNE has attempted to balance them for. I think that's the best way to say that. Attempted to balance them for. Nayeli is tanking and support. Now, she may do one of these things better than the other. And there may be situations where she doesn't do one of these things much at all. Nayeli's, an older champion. Again, as a core champion, one of the first 12 champions designed for the game. So she was designed in a way that gives you kind of options on ways to use her instead of this is what she is and you can specialize her beyond that, which is how newer champions work. So what does that mean? So it means that if we look at Nayeli's specializations, she has a path called Oath of Vengeance, and she has a path called Oath of Devotion. Her Oath of Vengeance increases the damage of champions behind her. Her Oath of Devotion is her. This is more of just a support spec. If you want Nayeli to be support, but not really a tank, you go Vengeance. But if you want her to be a tank, you go Devotion. I know it doesn't really look that way, because all it says is it increases her health by 70, and you're like, 70? How does that help her tank? Unfortunately, this doesn't really... This explanation at the top is better. It focuses on tanking enemies and increasing her own survivability, keeping her foes from attacking her friends. This is more the important part. And it isn't always. So down here, it doesn't really tell you. But this tells you, hey, this is going to tank. Because it's going to increase her health every time she gets a health upgrade. Because tanks, as a role, tanks get health upgrades regularly as they level up. Whereas the other champions don't. So every time she gets a health upgrade, she's going to get more health than she would have if she were in her vengeance path. And she's going to get some extra tank. She's going to get an extra tanking feature for survivability for her team here. So it's important to know that if you are using Nayeli in your front column, if you are using Oath of Vengeance, she is not a tank, really. She becomes what they tried to, at one point, term a bruiser, which is somebody who may have more health than other champions, and thus is a little bit of a sack of hit points to get through for enemies, but isn't necessarily a tank. So know that Oath of Devotion is tanking for Nayeli. Let's throw her up front for the moment. With the cart full of nerds. So one thing we want to do is we want to make sure that if we're using certain tanks, we're reading their specializations to see, is there a specialization that makes them tankier, so I can keep the tank alive and the formation alive in high damage situations. So that's kind of the first thing we're looking at, tanking, when we're looking at somebody with the tanking role, whether it's got support next to it or we don't, doesn't matter, or DPS. We'll see a couple of those today. We want to know, is there a way to keep them alive? Because that's what tanks need to do. The other number, there's a lot of other things going on up here. The other thing that's important with roles and with tanking is the overwhelm number. So tanking, you want to see tanking, and then you want to look over here and see overwhelm. Nayeli has an overwhelm of 20. As the tooltip states, this champion becomes overwhelmed when they're being attacked by 20 or more enemies at once. An overwhelmed champion takes more damage from all enemies based on the number of enemies attacking them. So a tank champion is going to have a high overwhelm number. If we look at, say, well, let's just switch to Gaarawarr. I have Gaarawarr. Oh, no, she starts out high, too. Let's go to Binwin. Binwin has an overwhelm of 5. This is because Binwin is not a tank. So they're going to be able to, take a little bit of a beating from a couple enemies. They're going to be able to hold off up to 5 enemies, which is what most squishies do in the game. But if you want to hold off more than 5 enemies, you need to go with a tank. Put her back out there. Tanks are going to allow more enemies to build up on them. This is that point where you're pushing and you're not killing right away, and then they're attacking your tank. You want that in some cases, because as we're going to talk about, tanks usually have abilities that buff the rest of your team based off being attacked. That is a feature some tanks have. So that is power that you reach and that will allow you to push further. So this allows you to take damage from more enemies without necessarily taking all that bonus damage. That's going to overwhelm a squishy really quick. There are ways to affect things like your overwhelm. Some tanks have feats for this. I'm so glad she does. I was like, watch this be Nayeli, one of the people that doesn't. Nayeli does have feats. You can up it by 5. You can up it by 10. These are one of the ways that you make a tank more. You can make a tank more survivable depending on how the tank is dying. Right. So survivability for a tank, it comes up to 2 things. 1, the amount of health they have, and 2, their overwhelm number. Generally speaking, those are the 2 things that are going to determine the survivability of a tank. How much health do they have overall? And how high can they stack enemies? Now, feats can also increase health. As you see, that's kind of where I dove right in. I wanted lots of health on Nayeli for whatever reason when I was using Nayeli last. So you can affect health with feats, and you can affect overwhelm with feats. Some combination of the two, may create the most survivable form. But tanks are also going to have other feats that were based off their abilities that might boost party damage. to help you kill, because what there are times, this is one of the things you have to figure out when you're placing your tanks and when you're using tanks effectively. You need to figure out when you push all the way to the point where you can't, we'll just go ahead and progress here. Where you're getting a large buildup of enemies, there are things that you have to look for when it comes to tanking and tanking effectively. Like, is your tank able to survive there? Setting up survivability is a big deal. Like, are they dying? And what I mean here is, like, are they dying before they're overwhelmed, or are they dying after they're overwhelmed? This is what you need to figure out. If they're dying before they're overwhelmed, your tank needs more health, potentially, right? Because if they're not even getting to their overwhelm point, they're just not survivable enough health-wise to be your tank currently. They might be your only tank, and that just may mean you're out of luck at the moment. But that's when you would look for health feeds. That's when you would look for health feeds. So potentially raising the health of your tank could keep them alive at that area. If they're dying after they hit the overwhelm point, if it's pretty clear that what's going on is they're getting overwhelmed and the bonus damage is what is killing them, you can try giving them an overwhelm feat and seeing if that helps you push further. Because what you're trying to do is keep them alive long enough. In both of these situations, you're trying to keep them alive long enough for the DPS boosts that they might be providing to raise the damage of your team so that they can kill and you can move to the next level. That's the purpose of a tank. The purpose of a tank is to soak up damage and buff the people behind them in such a way that you're able to meet the requirements of the level, which we see at the top right at enemies defeated, and move forward. That's what we're looking for in almost all cases, right, from a tank. So the other ways that they can help us do this, since we're talking about taking damage and buffing the party, if we look at the abilities of a tank, there's going to be the support. If this is a tank support, they're going to support you with buffs. So Nayeli's Aura of Courage increases damage of champions in the column behind Nayeli by an amount. Now, this is on all the time. This is her support buff. It is not her tanking buff. This is her support buff. This is a general support buff that you'll see from a lot of champions. Aura of Protection is her actual tanking buff. So this is the one that doesn't kick in until Nayeli starts getting attacked. Lots of tanks have this. This is kind of what you want to look for when you're looking at a tank support character, is what kind of support buffs do they offer and what kind of actual tanking buffs do they offer, because that's going to determine what situation you're trying to get them into. What are they good at? How are they going to be the best in helping you move forward? So Aura of Protection increases the damage of all champions by an amount for each enemy attacking Nayeli and or each enemy in rage stack. So Nayeli can buff for each enemy attacking, no limit. So as long as Nayeli can stay alive, every time a new enemy comes up and sits there and starts hitting her, she increases damage by that amount. For me, it's a lot, but for you, maybe lower or maybe higher. It's gonna that one varies based off your gear. So for each enemy attacking her, she's gonna boost the damage behind. This is why I say sometimes you want to make sure you're surviving long enough to get as many damage boosts as possible to your formation, so that they can blow up whatever's attacking you, right? And Aura of Protection is one of those abilities that is perfectly suited for that. It doesn't have a limit, so it can go as high as Nayeli can survive, and it buffs the damage of all champions, so it isn't even limited. Her other one wants you in the column behind, but this one is just everybody. So it's a very free ability. Now, it also does enrage stacks. What's an enrage stack? Enrage is something you're going to see primarily early on boss levels. So whenever a boss comes up and walks across the stream or a screen or walks onto the screen and attacks you from range, the second they're able to start attacking you, a meter will pop up at the bottom that says enrage, and it slowly fills, and then their rage ticks to 1 to 2, or I think it starts at 2 and then it goes to 3 and then to 4. And what that is a damage multiplier for the boss, so that eventually, if you don't kill the boss fast enough, it's ramping its power up so that it can wipe you. Right? And what you're doing at that point is you're racing the boss's enrage meter to try to kill it before it kills you. Because you might be able to tank it for a while, but maybe not forever. Right? If it's hitting you, you can't take it forever. So that's the enrage meter. So tanks like Nayeli will also ramp damage for each number on the enrage meter. They will treat that enrage number like an enemy. And that way they are also still, if you get to that point, they are also still raising their damage along with the boss. And it is then a race to see who can kill who first. Right? So Nayeli gives you that option. And a lot of tanks with this ability give you that option. You can also see enrage stacks on a regular level. There is a cap to the number of enemies that can be on the screen at once. It is capped at like all of these trash mobs is what we're talking about. You can have 100 trash mobs on the screen at once. That's all these little monodrones that are coming out. If we weren't killing them, they could build up to 100 of them. And then they will stop spawning. That is just where CNE has decided, probably shouldn't put more than 100 out there. It'll probably destroy performance. And then enrage will kick in. And it will act like, and they will start doing more damage, just like a boss. Okay? So you can see enrage stacks on other levels. It's not going to be a thing you see as a newer player. But once you get into the mid game or the end game, you might see that a lot. In the game, deep pushing involves moving to a level, letting 100 enemies build up, because you need that many to get you the damage boost for your tanking abilities to be able to clear them and have the enrage ticking in to be able to clear them and then moving forward. End game pushing is slow. Can be very slow. So keep that in mind. This is a big tank ability. So far we're looking at they're going to have the tanking roll. Having a tanking roll means you're going to get health upgrades, which if you notice we haven't seen any so far. But if we come down here, like her specialization was her first health upgrade, and then she starts getting regular health upgrades, right? So tanking roll, health upgrades, overwhelm, a high overwhelm number. And then tanking buffs, right? These are the kind of the things we're looking at for. Now, there's one other thing that we might find, and that's some kind of survivability feature. We'll talk about that when we get to somebody with one. But as we level up Nayeli, we can look and see her health is now real high, right? In the EO 6 range, because she's gotten lots and lots of health upgrades. Like, it starts off low, then it's going to get higher and higher and higher. As you get further and further through her health upgrades, she's going to get more and more health. The other feature of tanks, should be all tanks now, but what I consider a good tank, they're going to have a way to share their health with the rest of the party. Why? Why? Right? Like, this doesn't make them more tanky, but it makes the rest of the party more tanky. Why would you do this? Because a tank's job is to help your party survive. And one of the ways, the main way a tank does this is by sharing their health to the rest of the party, so that when you get to a point, if there's multiple tanks in your front line, it helps raise their health up so that your maximum health of your tank line goes up. But also, when you get to places where you're being attacked, where the enemies are attacking the whole party, or maybe the front two lines, or they're attacking at random to anyone in the party, the further you go, the amount of damage they're doing could just one-shot a squishy if they don't have any health. So having a tank with health share helps to prevent that. If you take Nayeli in her Vengeance spec, not only is her health upgrades lower, she doesn't get the health share ability at all, which is why she's not really a tanking spec for her. It's a bruiser spec, right? She's got a little more health and a high overwhelm, so she can take a beating, but she's not protecting your party outside of that, right? So again, devotion spec for Nayeli gives her all the health she needs to survive for some serious tanking, and gives you health share. That's what we're looking at. So again, tanking role, gonna get health upgrades, gonna have an overwhelm number, gonna have a tanking buff of some kind, and gonna share health. And then extra bonus features we don't see on Nayeli. They might have some kind of damage prevention or recovery mechanism, but we don't see that with Nayeli. Nayeli is a basic tank, but she does work as a basic tank. She is your first tank that you get in the game. So if you're a brand new player and Nayeli isn't up in the front in Sword Coast, please do that. So that you can push further. If you don't have other tanks available, right? So let's talk about somebody with a survivability feature. You know what? I could do Briv, but we're gonna go with Ayla. Let's talk about Ayla. So Ayla, if you open up Ayla, you will see Ayla has one of the things that you want. Tanking role. She has an overwhelm. Hey, 25. That's nice, right? It's a little higher. Her base attack has kind of a survivability feature. This does count as a survivability feature. Maybe not a great one. The last part of this is it says that her base attacks knock them back slightly. So the enemies that she hits, she knocks them back. This is good. This keeps things off of your tank and keeps them from attacking. So it is a little bit of a survivability feature. And there are situations where, like, if you're fighting a boss and the boss is melee, the boss may not get to you if you're either attacking fast enough or you're slowing them as well some other way with the knockback, right? So survivability feature. But the other survivability feature she has, shielding storm. So when an electrified enemy, there's a whole trigger system for this, but when an electrified enemy attacks Ayla, she gains a damage shield equal to 0.5% of her health times the total number of Aroas synergy stacks. And she checks this number. She checks for this and resets her shield every 30 seconds. Damage shield is a temporary HP shield, so she gets a temporary health pool that stacks on top of her regular health. And when enemies attack, it's going to hit that first. Because she can reset this every 30 seconds, if she gets this number high enough, there is the potential that if enemies aren't getting all the way through the shield in 30 seconds, she just resets it and thus never actually takes damage to her health pool and thus never needs healing. That's a big deal. So there are tanks who have this ability as a survivability feature, and generally speaking, it's real strong. Ayla's got toned down a bit, which I was all for. It was too strong. She could just live forever. As long as the shield went up, she could live forever. Now she can actually die, which is actually a healthy place for the game to be in, so shockingly. But this is great, especially at lower levels. She could throw up this huge shield, and if she has enough synergy stacks, it can be a huge number, and keep her alive, right? So this is an example of a survivability feature. Shields are one survivability feature. There are some tanks that just straight up negate damage. Here we go, Briv. Right here, Steel Bones. When Briv comes under attack, metal shoots out of his pores and covers him in strong armor. While armored, Briv takes 10% less damage. And then blah, 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 gets other stuff, right? So Briv looks like this when he's not being attacked. Well, actually, let me get him out of here. Here we go. It looks like this when he's not being attacked, but when he is being attacked, suddenly armor envelops him, and he starts taking 10% less damage. Just flat 10% off the top. It just goes away. It's just not a thing. He's just going to take 10% less damage when he's being attacked. So regardless, no matter what, he's just going to be taking 10% less damage. The first attack, might get through. I've never actually tested that, but everything else is 10% less damage. This is another survivability feature. For better or for worse, as you can see up here, Briv is a tank. I think I have a... oh, no, I don't. Okay, yeah. So Briv is tanking, healing, support, and speed. So Briv can tank. He can also heal. Healing, self-healing is another survivability feature. In fact, it's kind of a damage negation, but on a timer, if we want to think about it that way. Because you're reducing, as long as he's not killed before it kicks in, you've effectively reduced the amount of damage he took just on a delay, right? You could think about healing that way. Healing is survivability, but Briv is one of the few people, actually, he may be the only tank that heals. I think he is. It's a bit much, folks. Briv's a real good tank. Obviously, his overwhelm numbers, we've seen 20, we've seen 25, now we're looking at 30, and this is before feats. So you can get overwhelm numbers. This is generally one of the higher overwhelm numbers. But yeah, so this is one of his survivability features. If we look down, healing flow is his other. This is the healing. So his pet Flump appears next to him and stores healing power whenever he's hit after 10 hits or 10 seconds. So there is a variable thing here, whichever comes first. Flow heals all champions in the party for half of the damage Briv took during that time. There's ways to raise this. He has a specialization that increases the healing that Flow does. There's also a perk in the game. There's tanking features and bonuses and blessings and perks and other things. But there is a perk under Mert called Perk Up that increases the healing received by tank champions. Not even just in the tank column, but all tank champions get 50% more healing. There's a way to make it so that Briv, here, let's just go ahead and do it. Go with the flow, raises the effect by 50%, so that takes him to 75%, and then you boost it by 50% against from Perk Up. Suddenly Flow is healing the entire party for over 100% of the damage that Briv takes, which means as long as Briv stays alive for 10 hits or 10 seconds, he effectively gets all of his health back. So makes Briv kind of in the early to mid game kind of this incredibly survivable tank, overpowered tank, and then at the higher levels you get to the point where you could start taking a lot more damage in 10 hits and in the 9 hits, and he might fall over. Shielding, again, a shielding on like the self shields from Ayla have become a little more balanced. There is still a self shield in the game that can outdo this survivability feature. It's on Tyrell. But this is an amazing survivability feature. This makes Briv incredibly survivable. As long as he can live, again, by a combination of overwhelm number and the health that you give him, if he can stay alive those 10 hits, you're good. You're good, right? So these are the things you look for, right? These are the things that you're looking for, like what makes a good tank. Combinations of all of these features. Now, again, not all tanks are going to function the same way. They're going to have different health values. They're going to have a different overwhelm number. We've seen that. They're going to buff the party in different ways based off their tanking feature, like Ayla. Ayla doesn't have I said, hey, usually you have some kind of tanking buff. Ayla doesn't have one. Ayla is one of those as a tank who is super survivable in the front line, but provides support in a strong enough way that they didn't even bother giving her a tanking feature, really. Her tanking feature is survivability. When she gets hit, she procs her shield, right? To stay alive longer. But her actual ability that boosts party damage is just based off building up this primed and electrified state, which doesn't require her to be hit. Doesn't require her to be hit, which means Ayla is not only a super survivable up here in the front line, but if you only have one tank in your in the front line, like available, if there's only one slot in the front column, but you want to build the health of the tank in your front column, you can add a second tank, even in a single tank formation. You just put them somewhere else, and Ayla is a prime example of a tank who fits that secondary, like, backup tank in the formation role. She exists, and she is helping the team be more survivable because of her health share feature, but she's not doesn't have to be tanking, because she can do her debuff from anywhere in the formation. So this is where when you're running, like, we see people get into a lot of trouble in Tomb of Annihilation when they're trying to unlock Dragon Bait in a variant called the Sorrel's Resolve. You're fighting a lich called Valindra's Shadowmantle, and every time you kill her, she resurrects herself and gets stronger and does more damage, has more health, and you have to kill her all over again. And she does this a certain number of times based off how far you pushed. Every time you beat her, she gets to resurrect again one more time on the next time you run into her. People have problems staying alive because as she raises her damage, and she's raining it down on your whole party, she wipes out all your squishies. And usually one of the things people don't realize in this is that, well, you adding more tanks makes your overall party more survivable. Now, depending on where you put them, they might not be buffing your DPS, but Ayla is a great example of somebody, because she can go anywhere and support anywhere. She's a good addition to parties like that, because she's raising the health and applying everything in her kit, even though she's not in the tank line. So having tanks like that is important. Tanks that don't have to be in front to do their job. Yeah, and that's before we even talk about formations and variants where you don't even need the tank. Like, that is actually a variant where you don't need your tanks in the front line. If you have tanks that can buff from the back, that's fine. But it's rare. Those are rare scenarios. Let's talk about Tyrell. Tyrell is another core champion and an example of a tank support tanking healing support, where the tanking ability really only matters if you choose the right specialization. So there is a Moonbeam that is the support healing for kind of side of Tyrell, and then Wild Shape is the tanking support, and because they're self-shielding, I guess kind of a self-heal. As it says, it transforms them into a bear, grants them a bunch of health points, and increases their overwhelm point, because right now they start off with an overwhelm of 5. But when we go into Wild Shape, you'll see now they're a bear. Well, oh no, wait, I forgot. This is the unicorn skin. So right now they're a unicorn. I should swap this. Hold on, let me get back. Let me get Tyrell back. Tyrell has a bunch of skins in there. The Wild Shape is always great. So Tyrell is a bear, or barrel, as we like to call them. When Tyrell's in their Wild Shape form, this is their tanking form. So not only is it giving them more health, it's giving them more overwhelm, like we see they're in a 25. They've got the health share. They increase damage as a straight up buff within 2 slots, which means they don't necessarily have to be in the front line, but they do have damage reduction. It is very minor. It's one of those things that could probably use. Well, no, Tyrell's strong enough; he doesn't need a buff. But it's kind of good early on because it's a flat value. It doesn't scale well into the late game. And then they do have Forces of Good, where they buff good champions for each enemy attacking them or each enemy in rage stack. This is what I want to point out. I didn't point this out on Nayeli's kit, but I'm going to point it out here because Tyrell is an example of a tank that doesn't need to be in the front line to buff, because they just buff within 2 adjacent slots. Forces of good, if you are reaching an enrage point, they don't need to be taking damage from enemies to trigger forces of good. The enemies just need to be enraging. I know this is a really kind of fiddly qualifier, like we're getting really deep into the details, but it is a detail to keep in mind, because it does mean that if you are having survivability issues and you're using someone else as your tank in a single tank frontline, you can still have Tyrol within 2 of your actual DPS, and when the boss starts to enrage, they will, if they're a good DPS, they will get this extra buff along with whatever your main tank is providing. So Tyrol can function as a secondary tank away from the front line and build the boosts that you're getting to damage based off enrage without being attacked themselves. Now the big survivability feature for Tyrol is this chomp, the ultimate. When they're in bear form, they leap to the nearest enemies, they bite them with huge jaws, and based on the number of enemies hit and or killed, they gain a damage shield. Now the damage shield slowly fades. It fades over the course of 60 seconds. As you'll see, the cooldown for me on Tyrol Shielding Bite is 60 seconds. But when you're as a new player with Tyrol, it's going to be a lot more than 60 seconds. 60 seconds is what it reaches when you max the cooldown item. So when you cap the cooldown item and you get the reduction all the way to the top, you can have Tyrol's shielding mechanic on cooldown, which means the shield's always going to be there unless they're doing more damage than the shield can provide over 60 seconds, right? So Tyrol's super survivable self-shielding tank. Again, there aren't a whole lot of self-shielding tanks in the game, but if we hit this, I'll show you what a tank... There we go. The big yellow bar is the shield, and as you can see, a huge amount of health. Way more than Tyrol had at the first place. Way more than Tyrol had in the first place. This is why a self-shielder that can boost their shield up way more than their health can be tankier than someone like Briv, because Briv can only take a hit that's as big as their health pool and then hopefully heal it within 10 seconds or 10 attacks, whereas a self-shielder whose shield is way bigger than their health pool can take huge hits that are way bigger than their health pool. So keep that in mind. Just another way this, but again, this one fades off until you cap it. It's not going to be a consistent survivability thing, but later on in the game, because Tyrol's a core champion, he'll get lots of item levels just passively, and you'll be able to tank real strong with him. Let me think about who else do we have that has some odd survivability features. Well, let's have some odd features. Nerds are technically DPS, tank, healing, and support. We'll talk about them because they're funny. The only way Nerds is an actual tank is if the fighter is in front. As if the fighter is in the front of the cart. Now, Nerds exist with a bunch of different potential possible things in the front. They have 6 different Nerds that are available, but only 3 can be in your cart at any one time. And their ultimate shakes the box and changes who's in there. The fighter has to be active because that's the only way they get the big health boost. So they're a little... Nerds are a little odd. Nerds are a little odd that way. So if you're going to use them as a tank, you have to do Orange Leader standing by, and then you have to shake the box. And now Orange is guaranteed to be in the front of the cart. Guaranteed to be in the front of the cart, which means you can now tank with Nerds. Now they're going to have a lot of health. Well, more health than they had before. Because they don't... As you scroll, I'm scrolling to kind of show you if you're looking... they don't get health upgrades. They don't get health upgrades. They just get this health amount here. Now the oranges on it can get an upgrade, but but that's how they get their health upgrades, is only if the fighter's in the front. Their overwhelm number is not great. And they don't, yeah, that's what I thought. This is one of the examples where they don't have overwhelm feats. That's something that C&E probably could add later. So nerds can function as a tank. If you'll note, they didn't have health share. They're not, so this is how you know they're not great at this. They're not great at being a tank. They can function as a tank. They're not great at being a tank. So nerds, one of those weird, odd scenarios where, yes, they are a tank, technically. Not the best tank. Can function if you just need somebody to soak up some damage. They can function that way. But they're not going to be amazing at it. Look at that. Gromma's another, we'll say, unusual tank. Gromma has, she gets some effects right away. So she has a survivability feature that decreases the effect of overwhelm on Gromma by 25%. That's just straight up all the time. And you get it early on. So she can exist in the front line. I say this because a lot of times we're not using Gromma in the front line. But she can exist in the front line early on. But she actually, like Nieli and like Tyrol, she has specializations that turn her into different things. So Circle of the Mountain is technically her tanking spec. So she gains Stone Skin and takes half damage from ranged attacks, which is a nice survivability feature. Circle of the Arctic is her support spec. She gets an AoE that slows enemies' speed and slows their attack timers. Well, if it takes them twice as long to attack, that's also a survivability feature, folks, which makes her real nice. And the Circle of the Swamp is actually a DPS spec. Now, the interesting thing is, again, she takes less damage from Overwhelm right away. She also gets her health upgrades regardless of which one of these specializations you choose. So she actually can be a super tanky DPS. Or a super tanky support. Or she can have more tank features. So if we choose the tank features, you're only going to get some of these features. You're only going to get these features if you choose the tank spec, mountain spec. So Spiked Shell, this is her tanking buff, if you want to say it, but it's more of a debuff. So when somebody attacks them, they get a pierced armor effect, which makes them take additional damage, and that stacks. She increases damage of neutral champions for each enemy attacking her and or each enemy in rage stack. So this is, again, another ramping buff, so she gets kind of two of those features. She does get health share in this spec. So she can exist, but she has to be attacked to really get the best of that situation. And generally speaking, she isn't as healthy as other tanks. The trade-off is she gets her health all the time, right? So tanks, a lot, as you're beginning to see, we're not going to be able to cover like every single tank in the game. But tanks have a variety of different ways that they're going to put together all of these different features we're talking about to create a different type of tank for a situation. Let me see who else jumps out at me as somebody we need to talk about. Well, let's talk about Egbert. Egbert's fun. Egbert's base attack, he throws a bomb at the nearest enemy. So Egbert, I gotta love Egbert. Egbert is a ranged tank. This is something that we wanted in the game. A lot of us wanted in the game for a long time. Because for a long time, all of our tanks were melee tanks. We had no ranged tanks. We had no magic tanks. And there are variants where they're like, you can only use ranged attackers in this variant. Or you can only use magic attackers in this variant. And in those, when we were trying to do those variants, we had no tanks at all. So now, Egbert joins us as a ranged tank who throws a bomb at the nearest enemy, dealing damage and knocking back enemies in a small area. Well, this is a fantastic survivability feature for Egbert. because he's basically like, oh, there's a lot of stuff on me. Boom, and they just get knocked back, and then they have to walk back up again, and then they get knocked back, and then they have to walk back up again. He does have a long cooldown on this, but there's ways to raise attack speed. There's also ways to slow enemies. So he can keep enemies away from himself and his party if he wants. He has his own he has a healing feature. So after he attacks, if there's a champion below 50% hit points, including himself, he heals the most damaged champion in the party by a number. Now, there's a lot of math that goes on here, so we're not going to get into the exact amount, but by a number. His health, a lot of his stuff is based off absolute values of atonement points. There's a lot of stuff that you got to figure out. There's atonement points over here, which I apparently have none of. Great. But you build parties around building his atonement points, and he does things based off atonement points. So he shares his health by 5% times atonement points, and does all this stuff based off atonement points. So, but he does have a pair of survivability features, so he can AoE knockback, and be like, whoo, taking some damage, psh, heal himself, right? Which is nice. And he does get health. He gets some healing. You can boost the healing with feats, and there's overwhelm feats. So he's got a good overall assortment of things to do. Now I did mention only ranged tank. Well, let's talk about our magical tank, Blueshie. Blueshie is tanking support. However, as you see with the overwhelm number, she's currently in her support role, and I've got to remove some people to try to get her into her tanking role. Blueshie only becomes a tank after she dies. What? Welcome to Idle Champions, folks. Let's see if we can get Blueshie dead. Probably not. We'll see. But Blueshie only turns into a tank when she dies. This is just the feature of Blueshie. She has very low health early on. And then once she dies, she becomes a spectral version of herself. Here we go. And now she's a tank. Now she has 25 overwhelm and a sack of hit points. Right? So Blueshie is... to actually be a tank, she needs to die first. But you actually, oddly enough, you want her alive as long as possible while you're pushing towards the end game, because that's how she gets one of her support buffs. But then she becomes tanky in her ghostly form, which is just fantastic. I think Blueshie is a fantastic addition to the game. I love that she is a magical tank. So we actually have one. But then B, we get this, because here's the magic. This is a magic symbol for base attack to know what somebody's doing. This is the ranged attack. So we now have tanks that can fit all of these different roles. We even have another kind of tank that we didn't have for a long time. We have a shorty tank, because there are things where they're like, hey, you need short folk only. Well, we now have a goblin artificer, which is a tank. She wraps herself up in armor. And when she starts getting attacked, this shield the face shield, clicks into place, and things expand, and she becomes super tanky mode, which is fantastic. So this is Lizaps. Lizaps is she builds up her health based off her power armor. So she gets a stack for every second that she's not under attack. So she builds up her tankiness, and then when she starts getting attacked. Then the tankiness goes away. It gets used up. It's an interesting kind of ebb and flow feature for Lizaps, but shorty tank in the house. That's all that matters. Now it's so hard to decide who to talk about, because there are a lot of tanks. As you can see, everybody that I have showing up here at the bottom is a tank. There's also some swaps in places for tanks. I guess we got to talk about Warduke. Warduke's brand new to the game. Warduke is a tank DPS, one of the few tank DPS in the game. One of the two labeled tank DPS in the game, I'm guessing. Now, they buff themselves when they're being attacked. They're not, you notice there's no support role here. So Warduke is a tank that you use when either you don't have anyone else available, or you just want the tank to do damage. You want the tank to do damage, because Warduke does not buff anyone else. He is a selfish tank. There's another selfish tank. They're right over here, Archon. Warduke's not going to buff anybody else. So every time he attacks, he buffs himself. Every time he gets hit, he buffs himself. That's the way Warduke works. Now, he does do Health of All Champions. Yay. Surprising. But he does. And then he messes with formations. Warduke changes the way every other champion that has a positional formation ability works. So if a champion says, like Nieli earlier, buffs the column behind, Warduke flips it and buffs every column except the one behind. Warduke messes with everyone. So Warduke is brand new to the game. Warduke's going to change the way people play because Warduke. Because Warduke things. Let's pull Tyrell out. We'll throw Archon in. I need to take the Hand of Vecna off. There. Okay. Archon also kind of messes with positional formation abilities. Archon changes the way they attack based off how they're being attacked. So they have just a melee attack with the axe when when it's normal. If 6 or more enemies start attacking them, they gain a cleave, so they get an AoE that does 5 times damage. So they get a damage boost and an AoE just around that attack. When over 16 enemies are attacking, the base attack becomes Flame Breath that hits it's a cone and it does everything. And it gets 25 times the damage boost. So Archon's base attack functionality changes, but again, they are a DPS tank. This is all about them. This is all about them. They do share health. But then they soak up positional formations in different ways. I'm just going to pick one of these because we're not going to get all the way. This isn't a show about Archon. But just know they pick up positional formation abilities in different ways. They do have Archon they did add, I forgot about this. They did add a buff to evil champions. Now, again, if you've got Archon in your formation, they're probably your DPS. But you could potentially be TPSing with somebody else that's evil, because they will buff evil champions based off the damage they're taking. But usually, especially with a 30 overwhelm, usually you're using them as your tank. And you're just, trying to wreak Archon havoc, right? Who else we got? Real quick. If you have questions about certain tanks, you can always throw those in. I know Martin's grabbed about a dozen questions, and we could talk about specific tanks in the second half. Is there anybody here specifically? You know what? Let's talk about Havilar. I can't not talk about Havilar. So Havilar has a feature. We got to talk about Havilar shenanigans. These are those edge case scenarios, right? She does her buffing, she does her tanking, she does all this stuff, but she has these imps, right? And she has this ultimate that rotates the imps, but to rotate them, what it does is it causes them to jump out. One of them is going to jump out and blow up on an enemy, right? Well, when it blows up on an enemy and it doesn't kill it, it applies a slow. It applies a slow to that enemy. That slow, when the cooldown comes back and then you do it again, you pull more imps out, you have them go out and attack and blow up again, that slow stacks with itself. And it becomes, as long as you're doing it on melee enemies, it becomes an infinite survivability feature, because you can basically slow an enemy repeatedly with all of this, to the point where that enemy isn't moving anymore and just stands in place. There are times when this matters. Maybe you're running into a melee boss you're having trouble with. Well, knock them back with Ayla. slow them with Havilar. Eventually, they're just parked in the middle. They're not hitting you, but the enrage stack is building up, and eventually you can kill them, right? Because of tanking bonuses based off enrage stacks. So this is an interesting feature. It doesn't work that great if it's just massive amounts of enemies building up on your tank line. It can, but the second you hit a ranged enemy, you're going to be toast, right? You're going to be toast. Anybody else here? You know what? We got to talk about Celise. Let's drop this out. Let's bring Celise in. Celise. Oh, I got to talk about one more thing after this. Celise is a tank that has a lot of a variety of specializations that can be tailored to her tanking in different situations. But she has this what I call stance revolution thing going on, where she has a divine sensibility that alters its effect based off the combat stance she's in. She has 4 different combat stances, and each one is triggered. You switch between them based off her ultimate. So the ultimate button, it doesn't act as an ultimate. It just switches her stance. So see, I'm getting a different symbol now. I'm in, I want to say this is deflect stance. Yes. So aggressive is a sword. Wall looks like the castle. Deflect looks like a shield. And then there's last resort that looks like a lightning bolt. And when it's all charged with electricity like that, she has her actual ability ultimate available. But she can rotate between them all. There's the aggressive stance. And each one provides different situations to the different things to the party, based off the stance she's in or not in. You have to look at those triggers in her ability list and in her kit. One of the things that she does is in her wall stance, champions in the same column as her take 25% less damage from melee attacks. So that means her and any other tanks in the front line are going to take reduced damage. So this is a survivability feature that she shares with her entire tank column, which makes her a great tank to have a multi-tank front line, because she is making the rest of the tanks more survivable. There are some shenanigans to be had. So this, again, 25% less damage. But in the tank column, this means that this is a positional formation ability, because it applies to a specific position in the formation. It is the front column. Narak has an ability called Githzerai Focus that boosts positional formation abilities. So, I think you know where we're going. I hope you know where we're going with this. You put Narak in with Celise, and suddenly Celise, if we come over here to Divine Sense, wait. Oh, I need Celise. He boosts positional formation abilities for people who have wisdom of 14 or higher. So if I come over here and I slot Celise's wisdom feat, I am now, champions in the same column as Celise take 119.9% less damage from melee attacks. Folks, that means they take no damage from melee attacks. At all. Some people have dubbed this, and I'm going with it, the Great Wall. Basically, Celise can create this wall in a front line, and as long as you're not running into any melee enemies or any ranged enemies, you're taking no damage in your front line. It doesn't matter who else you have in the front line. You could have a Squishy in your front line. But as long as you got Narag next to Celise, your front line's taking no melee damage at all. This is what in the community we like to call shenanigans. There are lots of different ways to create shenanigans, and generally they involve positional formation abilities. Yeah. So, this is a shenanigan feature of Celise. What else we're going to talk about? 2 more things. I would be remiss if I did not talk about the tank who is not a tank. Turiel. The tank who is not a tank. Let's get Dragon Bite out there. Turiel. Support. Turiel's a support with a 5 overwhelm. Not a tank. But are they? Uh, they may not be a tank, but they belong in your front line. In fact, they really shouldn't be anywhere else except your front line, unless it's a worst case scenario. Why is that? Orders demand when an enemy attempts to attack Turiel, they instead attack a different valid target if one is available. When this occurs, Turiel buffs their other ability. So Turiel is what I refer to that as the Jedi mind trick. He's just like, I am not the tank you're looking for. And instead of attacking Turiel, everyone will now attack Egbert. Everyone. No one will attack Turiel. He doesn't allow it. He just doesn't allow it. So Turiel can take a two tank front line and turn it into a one tank front line, by making it so that you don't do that. You don't attack me. How dare you think that that's going to happen? He never gets attacked. Now, the problem comes is if you're in a single tank front line, Turiel is not the person for you because there's no target for him to push them off to. They're just going to smack him in the face and he's going to fall over because he has no health and no overwhelm. Not a tank. 100% not a tank, but exists in the tank line. And that is the best place to have them. Last two things. We're going to put Briv and Blushi up here. Briv and Blushi are currently somewhat unique in the game. Because they have taunts. Taunts are usually, like if you've ever played MMOs, like taunting is usually a good thing to have for your tank because that's how you keep the mobs aggro on you, right? At least in the good MMOs. I'm being real picky. You need to be able to grab that aggro and keep it. Well, Blushi and Briv can both do this. With Briv, it is a 20% chance. Each enemy hit has a 20% chance of being taunted, switching its target to Briv. So Briv can pull 20% chance to pull enemies from another tank to you. Not always a good idea. Just going to throw this out there. If you're secondary or tertiary, because there are 3 tank front lines, tanks, need people attacking them to buff, and they have a solid buff ability that maybe is better than Briv's, then maybe Briv isn't who you want up front. Maybe Briv doesn't work well with them. Blushi attacks with an Eldritch Blast, dealing damage and taunting it if possible. But here's the thing. Blushi will always attack, will prioritize, because it doesn't say who she attacks. She prioritizes attacking someone that isn't attacking her to taunt it, because it will always taunt. Her attack is Taunting Blast. It taunts whoever she attacks. So she targets someone if there is someone on the screen that isn't attacking her, she will attack them and pull it to her. She wants everyone attacking her. Now, she has a single target attack, so it can take a while, but she can pull everyone off your secondary tank, given enough time. So this is an interesting way. These are 2 interesting champions where if you're in a variant where you're heavily restricted, and maybe they're the only tank you have, but it's a 2 tank front line, and you have to put somebody else up there who's a squishy and is only getting some health share. They're a good tank to have because they're going to pull attacks away from that squishy target onto themselves. These are currently the only tanks that do this, but who knows? Who knows what may happen in the future? Yeah, I feel like we've covered the general basics of tanks. I'm gonna go ahead and take a short break. We're gonna listen to some music. I want to say this is "Artificer of My Fate," which is the song for Lazaps, because I haven't heard that one in a while, and it's good. So we're going to listen to that. I'll come back and I'll dive into the dozen plus questions that we have about tanks. Be right back, folks.
Down in the cards, your dreams are ground up every day. To keep the heart of Sean alive, you pound away. But not for me, I will not live my life this way. I'm gonna make it up and build my own escape. There are a lot of streets my way to the top. I can't feel anything and I will never stop. My creations take me where I wanna go. I'll make it to the summit from the depths below. If you want something from this world, you have to take it, or just make it. Give me steel, give me fire, watch what I create. Make it real, come to spy, come to my escape. My machines and my dreams and reality. It's my destiny, and it fits on my face. My powered armor's growing stronger every day. Determination, perseverance carved the way. Don't let despair consume you, it will make you numb. Just lift your eyes up, look around, your time will come. When you want something in this world, go out and take it, or just make it. Give me steel, give me fire, watch what I create. Make it real, come to spy, come to my escape. My machines and my dreams, then reality. It's my destiny, and it fits on my face. Oh, oh yeah. Destiny is not what you're given, it's just what you make it. So just take it. Give me steel, give me fire, watch what I create. Make it real, come to spy, give me my escape. My machines, and my dreams, and reality. It's my destiny, God, it fits on my fate.
We're back. And I just realized while listening to that song that one of the reasons I love it so much is that I relate to Lizap so much as a dwarf. Give me steel, give me fire, watch what I create. Yeah. Yeah. Go Lizaps. Go Lizaps. Okay. Also, while we're on the topic, I did answer this in chat, but I'm going to answer it here as well. Kalana, are these instrumental versions of Bardic Inspiration songs available to download somewhere? No. However, I do have a Gaarawarr's Guide to Bardic Inspiration on the subreddit. and there are links to all of the songs, all of them. I use clips that I have I've loaded into my OBS, and I just select from a list. But and I try to mix it up so that we're hearing this stuff that we haven't maybe heard in a while, and that isn't fully produced and in game. Yeah. Yeah, the only stuff that you can download is the fully produced stuff that they've made available. So, Bardic Inspiration Volumes 1 and 2. 1.5. There's a 1.5 that has like the theme song in it too. But those are the only ones you can actually download to listen other places, the fully produced versions. Okay, I'm going to dive in and I'm going to try to hit the stuff that is... That's a troll question. I'm trying to hit the stuff that's on topic first, and then I'll go back and I'll answer whatever about the game, like I do. Freeman, you talked about Narak and Solis combo yesterday. What other good combos are there for Narak? In regards to tanking, there's some because I'm going to keep this on topic for the moment. In regards to tanking, there's some shenanigans. Potentially with healers or shielders, as long as they're meeting the Wisdom 14 requirement, he can help keep tanks alive. But generally speaking, the Selak, can we call it, yeah, or Nalis? Nalis? No, I just think Great Wall. That's the big combo that the community found out. Narak has functionalities in other things, like for Azaka farming, he can boost gold find, and lots of next to Orkira, boosts Orkira's healing, and thus boosts her debuff. Like, so there's a lot of Narak has shenanigans, and for a long time that was all anybody used Narak for, including me. I think we all kind of thought Narak was hot garbage as a DPS. Nowadays that's not true. Nowadays there are enough good supports out there, and some that are boosted with Narak's gets the right focus. Narak's actually for my account, is my best DPS. Sets the highest bud for me. So Narak is actually a viable DPS. Above viable, like top tier DPS, potentially. With the right supports, right? Which is always the caveat. But most of the meta supports work with Narak. Monkey Noob, who are the other tanks with warning instead of pain-based damage increase besides Sentry? I'm not sure what we're talking about. Hold on. This term is not a term I have... These terms are not terms I have heard of before. Let me go look. Let me go look at and see if I can define what's going on here. I mean, we're talking about the Guardian of Solon within 2 slots. Is she getting a buff that I'm not thinking of on the top of my head? Are we talking about how she attributes her synergy? She gets a stack every time an enemy spawns, and for each second a boss has been alive. Is this what we're talking about? I mean, Ayla kind of like, so she boosts based off the number of enemies on the screen. And Ayla's similar in that she boosts off electrified enemies. Off the top of my head, I don't remember. This isn't a unique feature in general. Like I said, Ayla has something similar. But most tanks are based off either getting hit or the enrage stack. Yeah. Instead of just visual number of enemies. That isn't always common. So fewer, if that's what you're talking about, Monkey Noob. Can you go over Sentry? Gelatinous Rubik's Cube. Can you go over Sentry if you have not yet? Sure. I mean, we're here. We're here. We might as well. Okay, so Sentry is a tank where... remember once upon a time at the start of the stream I said sometimes tanks shouldn't necessarily be in the front line? Sentry's one of those. Because Sentry is tanking support and speed. And for Sentry's speed effect to kick in, she can't be attacked. And since she can buff with Guardian of Solwyn within 2 slots, Sentry can be a support speed champion who also provides tank benefits in the sense that she will health share and she'll ramp up damage for your party because she does it based off the number of enemies on the screen, as we were just discussing. So Sentry is a tank that makes a great support tank outside of your front line. She has Create Echo. This is the little floating thing that's over her shoulder. And she has some effects on that based on whether she was hit or not. Or if the formation was under, things were under attack. We'll go over that in a moment. She has multiple spec choices based off the situations. I've chosen one that stuns enemies for 4 seconds, 50% chance to stun enemies for 4 seconds, because I like that as it's a survivability feature. One, right? It slows down the effect of them moving towards your formation, and also stops them from attacking for a few seconds. But it also works well with Lucius, her affiliation member. So if I'm using her to support Lucius, it's just become kind of my go-to thing. So we got the health share. We were just talking about her synergy stacks, which is she adds stacks to her pool based off, how many enemies on the screen, and or every time an enemy spawns, she adds a stack, and for each second a boss has been alive. And then she buffs her buff based off a percentage of those stacks. So Echo is what triggers a lot of different things. So Resolution, if this is her speed effect, if she's not been attacked in the highest unlocked area, there's a % chance that the quest requirements in the next area are reduced by 30%. I have it 30% because I have the feat in. And it's 100% chance, so it always happens because I've maxed out her slot 3 item. So it starts off at a low % chance, so it's RNG whether it happens or not, even if you qualify. But you can max this item out and keep it going all the time. This is what makes her a good speed champion. If she has been attacked in the current area, then her party buff will be increased by an amount on the next area you're in. So basically it's like, oh, things are getting hard now, I see. I'm going to raise my buff. That's what she does. And then when she herself is under attack, healing received by everyone in her column is increased by 25%. Now, this is usually the feature used if she's up here, right? Healing is going to go up by that percent. However, it didn't say only if she's in the front line. So this works as a heal for your party in situations where you are being hit by AoEs. You can put her in a column with squishies, and she will boost the healing that they're receiving to try to help keep them alive a little bit better. Usually it's a frontline thing. But it doesn't have to be. Now remember, she's not healing. She's just amplifying healing that they're receiving. That's Sentry, though. That's Sentry. Pretty straightforward now after her rework. Randram, to highlight the zaps from the Reddit Q&A info from this week, she'll be given out during participation in the Winterfest event. Yes. So starting, I believe Winterfest starts Wednesday? I think Winterfest starts Wednesday. So we are going to get our shorty tank Lizaps. Everybody will be able to unlock Lizaps on Wednesday. Lizaps, again, a Goblin Artificer, our only shorty tank. Some people look like tanks. Shout out to Brunor, who's fully armored and carrying a shield. Not a tank. He's a bruiser. He's what they call a bruiser. Oh, CNE. But Lazap's our only shorty tank currently. And neutral evil to add. Solid overwhelm. So again, every second she's not under attack, she gets stacks of her power armor. And she gets health based off her power armor stacks. Fury of the Small, so she increases damage of small champions for each small champion in the formation. So that's considered dwarves, even though dwarves are medium humanoids. Dwarves, gnomes, halflings, kobolds, or goblins. Tiny Bulwark, when she's under attack, she consumes some of her power armor stacks and buffs her Fury of the Small, right? So it's like a power-up mechanism. She's storing energy up when she's not being attacked, and then she releases it in bursts to help out. She does have health share. Lightning Launcher, when she's under attack by at least 5 enemies, she consumes 15 stacks of power armor and activates her Lightning Launcher, targeting one of the enemies attacking her and striking all enemies in a line. So it's a directed line-based AoE, and they take more damage for 15 seconds. Her ultimate actually triggers her power armor stack. So if she has more than 20 stacks, she overcharges her power armor. It prevents it from gaining any more stacks, but it increases the effect of Tiny Bulwark and Lightning Launcher. If she has less than 20 stacks, I believe it gives her stacks. We would have to get below that to find out again. You know what? Here, we'll move her. Come on, let me move. No, it's not going to let me move her up because we're dealing with ranged enemies. There we go. Yeah. So we'll see that effect here in a moment. The other stuff, Lazap's specializations. She can alter how she can get more. Increases the max stacks of power armor by 100%. This is usually what I take. This lets Tiny Bulwark and launch and Lightning Launcher trigger when any champion is under attack. So this is good for multi-tank formations. So she's always able to trigger those abilities. And then the Zapper is like boss fights. It basically makes Lightning Launcher pop out when there's only one enemy. Let me throw a bunch of stuff on her. I think that's everything. Yeah, and we have a bunch of stacks. So I can't show you the other feature of her ultimate, but yeah, she's basically a bit more of a micromanagey, with the ultimates there. And her armor dropped in. I told you. She brings the. Come here. It's not gonna let me. Not gonna let me drag that to the middle of the screen. It brings her helm down, her face shield in front when she's under attack. I love that. And her shield gets bulkier. It's pretty cool. Well, Zaps is fun. Reruns. What are some good ways to make Walnut a better tank? Walnut's really... Walnut's over here. Walnut's better in a multi-tank formation. She has a weird effect. I mean, there's no making her better until CNE makes her better. Her buff, it comes down to her support buff, really, is she buffs champions up to 2 slots away for each enemy killed in the area. And then it resets when changes areas. Well, if you can't kill anyone, and this is her primary buff that other things feed into. If you can't kill anyone, then she doesn't even get her primary buff. So what they intended for you to do is to buff her up on the level before, move to the next level and ride fire breath damage. Use like fire breath. She's meant to be used with like fire breath potions, so that you're getting kills and then you're getting some stuff fed into this before the bud degrades. That didn't really work out very well. She becomes her tanky self when she goes under attack. She becomes Wolf Nut. That's a neat feature. She has a partial health share before that. She's just pure support before that. She gets her full health share once she's under attack. But really, it comes down to the fact that she really is based off of... there's Wolf Nut. She really is based off of being able to kill stuff. She can be used. She can be a functional tank if you're pushing through variants. You have more than enough damage to get to where you're going. She provides buffs, and she has a good buff in that situation. But when you really get to your wall and you're trying to push your wall and it's hard to kill, all of her damage goes away. And where the game is now, we're to the point where usually when you're at your wall, you're past the point where fire breath potions are going to kill anything. So she falls off at end game, and there's just like, we can't change that. Like, that's CNE has to fix that. Aside from Teos Force, aside from Turiel, are there any more champions you recommend for those yada yada with no DPS champions in your formation requirements or goals for a patron challenge? I don't know why Turiel. Or you mean like, I don't know why Turiel would be in that. I mean, anybody who's not a DPS. There are tons of supports in the game and tanks. That one doesn't seem. Maybe I misunderstood that question. Because Turiel's. Turiel fits in that because he's support. But was it supposed to be with no tanks? I'm confused. TS Force, if you want to clarify that one. It was this. I'll put it in chat. It was this question. Smoking, if you have a Celise and Morduke, I suppose that she will protect everyone in all columns but hers. Yeah, that should be the way that works. We can actually. Why don't we find out? Like I said, Warduke changes positional formation abilities. So if we have Warduke and Celise, and now we come over here, Divine Sense is inverted. It should make deflect effect or wall be, well, it looks like it's just changing. Yeah, it's targeting the opposite slot, so it should be anybody not in her column, which means it should be affecting Warduke. Let's go see. Let's go see. This is the thing, because Warduke's brand new, you kind of have to, they've given you a heads up, like inverted. It's going to say inverted. You just have to go check it out. All I'm seeing incoming is this. It looks like, so it doesn't look like it's inverting that specific effect. Yeah. What I think it's doing is it's inverting where Divine Sense affects things. So normally it would be in the two columns, in the columns behind Celise, and now it's in the columns in front. It doesn't look like it's inverting the actual column-based effects, which is interesting. That might be something that we put in a ticket and ask, is this supposed to, or should it be? And find out. Because you would think it would also change these effects. Like wall and deflect. Because they're, say, same column. Or wall. Wall says same column. So you would think that would be inverted to be any other column. I'm also, hold on, no, the reason I'm not seeing is that I'm not in wall stance. Hold on. I'm silly. Am I in wall stance now? I wish nope, I'm in aggressive. Why is it not switching me? Why is it not switching me? There we go. Lately, I've had some issues with her ultimate not switching. Okay, now I'm in wall stance. Now we can check Warduke. My bad, folks. Usually, I just kind of leave her in wall stance. I forgot I switched her out for demonstration purposes. Increases damage. Yeah. So everyone except the column she's in. So this lets you put her, so it does invert it. It lets you put her somewhere else, and she can protect melee damage from everyone else. Now, the scenario that's useful in, who knows? But there's probably one that exists. There's probably one that exists. So, okay, it was supposed to be the tank champ. Yeah, you'd put the no DPS champions in. So, aside from Turiel, are there any champions you recommend for those no tank champions in your formation? Well, Turiel doesn't work in that either because he's not a tank either. Generally, when you're doing a patron chore that requires no tanks, you're not pushing somewhere. You're not pushing beyond where you're killing with click damage. You set your Modron automation to cycle at a level where you're still instantly killing with click damage, and you load up a bunch of speed champions, and you just speed through it. That's how you do those. You don't actually push because you're just getting a total number of levels with no X champion in your formation. It doesn't have to be in one run. So just speed champions in a lower reset zone. I mean, well, it shouldn't even matter because when you're doing patron chores, you should just be running to your click kill through a click kill zone anyway. You should never actually be tanking. So, what's the highest number relative of Blushi you've ever had? I don't know. I haven't tracked it. I got the achievement. I don't pay attention. I don't. All I care about when I'm pushing is, did I complete the variant I'm on, or did I get a lot of favor for Azaka farming? I don't necessarily pay attention to everything else. TS Force, when a boss goes into that enraged state, what are some of the best tanks to have in your formation in support positions? Not a frontline tank. I mean, anyone that buffs based off enrage, but doesn't have to be attacked. So we've talked about a couple of those. Dragon Bait is one that gets used a lot, but it can be now. Well, the Sentry is based off seconds alive. It's kind of the same thing as enrage to a certain effect. But yeah, you're looking for that kind of trigger, but without having to be attacked. And that's anyone that says based off the number of enemies attacking them and or a number of enrage stacks means it's going to kick that buff in even if they're not the one taking damage. And that's a lot of them. Generally you want to make sure that you're using people that are also going to be buffing you even if they're not in the front line. Ayla's great at that too. But beyond that, it depends on what you're trying to do. Could you give us a top tier list for that usage? For that specific usage, no, because that's not a situation I usually think about. Usually if I'm trying to figure out like what are the best tanks for pushing, I'm trying to figure out who's survivable enough to get me real deep. Like my pushing walls are now like over 1400, which means my tanks are taking lots and lots of damage. So I need now Tyrell's self shield, I need Ayla's self shield, I need Briv's damage prevention and healing. Anybody else just falls over. If they don't have those type of self-survivability features, they fall over at that level because there's no content in the game that requires us to push that far, frankly. So there's no reason for them to live at that level. But we're all constantly pushing ourselves beyond the limits of the game as it's in its current state. So let me see what else is specifically tanking related. I think the rest of these are fairly general. So let's dive into general questions. I'll go back to the top of the list. Freeman, I just watched your stream, rewatched your stream from yesterday, where you said that Lucius performed better for you. I'm adding those two words. And a non-heroic formation, yes. Can you elaborate then and say what champion combinations you're using? Started with season 1. I find it harder right now to clear higher variants since the season buffs are gone. Well, I mean, yeah, the buffs are gonna those buffs were boosting Aroas beyond their regular potential, just so that people would use them during the event and make it feel like, hey, we're requiring you to use these champions to clear out stuff, so we're going to buff them, so that you'll be encouraged to use them, and that's totally fine. But once those season buffs leave, everything's back to normal, and guess what? Those probably aren't your best champions anymore. I mean, they might not be. They might be. They might not be. Can I tell you exactly what formation I used? No, because I'm not in the place where I was testing that out. So I don't have any of that saved. But generally speaking, if we're talking about meta support I mean, like I already talked about the tanks that I might be using, like Briv or Ayla or Tyrell. Support champions, I was probably using Orkira, Avrin, Freely, Penelope. Those are big supports. Those are big time supports across the board, just generically speaking. Gromma and Arctic Spec. Putting putting those types of combinations together end up doing better for me than just going all Aroas, because Sentry's okay, but not amazing. Keelik, if you need heals, Keelik is a great healer, but when you're using the tank combinations I just mentioned, you don't need the extra heals, so he kind of falls off a little bit for me. If you're using less survivable tanks in your formation, you're going to need that. Nova is now a great buffer, but I actually haven't Avrin, depending on how many Aroas people I'm using, Nova's really solid for me, but my Avrin's pretty bulky. I mean, he's in the 3. He's got like a 507 for seeing double. I mean, the mirror image is the big one. So if I got some more like Goldens maybe through here on Nova, I might use her more. But yeah, it just depends. I'm just so used to Avrin. So it's just kind of generic meta champions, like support champions across the board, were working better for me than trying to go full Aroas. Jody, I'm considering Yorvin DPS. You should. They're good. Give me a quick rundown on his abilities and the best way to use him. Honestly, you just throw him in. I think I was talking about this yesterday. Yorvin is a DPS champion that doesn't need you to do anything special for him. He's just like, put me in, coach. The one thing I will say is you always want Eldritch Claw Tattoo. Hunger for Blood currently feels like it only exists for the achievement. I've never found a use yet for Hunger for Blood, other than the achievement. But Yorvin, you just watch. We're going to throw him in, and he's just going to start clearing the screen. I said he's going to start clearing the screen. Can you start clearing the screen? Okay, yeah, there we go. But he's real straightforward. So Blood Fury Tattoo is basically, hey, I'm going to buff myself when I attack. He debuffs the enemy, but it's built, because it only lasts for 2 seconds, it's built just to self-boost him, or give you a tiny moment to support other people. Like, I don't see Yorvin as support. I don't. I see them as a pure DPS. Infectious Fury, enemies that Yorvin has attacked take a lot more damage from all champions when they're attacking the formation. This is their support feature, but because they're single target, it still feels more like, hi, I'm supporting myself. But this would be the normal support buff. But yeah, I mean, you don't have to do anything special for that. Danger Sense, champions adjacent to Yorvin take a flat amount less damage from all attacks. And Yorvin gets a damage boost. So this boosts himself while providing survivability, flat amount of survivability to somebody else. The shenanigans can happen here. Just so you know. But really, it's just like, hey, make Yorvin next to whoever's taking damage, and you're going to get a damage boost. That's the only real indicator that maybe you want Yorvin adjacent to your tank line. But otherwise, Yorvin just goes out and mauls things. As I said on a stream the other day, for last week, and in my guide to Cimmeral, year 6. Jorvin's like full on Paul Blart Mall hop. Like he just jumps out and mauls something, that jumps out and hops out and mauls something else, hops out and mauls something else. That's just what Jorvin does. You don't have to do a lot. Like here's his debuff indicator. That's max debuff. That thing's gonna blow up the next time he hits it. Like, yeah. Jorvin just goes to work. Jorvin just goes to work. Just jumps out and just starts. You just put him in. And his damage, we're setting Bud with Sentry right now. That's wonderful. This is just a messed up formation. Oh, it's because I've got Warduke in. Yeah, everything's going to be weird about this formation because Warduke's in it. Hold on, let's get rid of Warduke. There. Now things should start normalizing. Sharkfighter 9000. Why do I see screenshots of people using Baloth in the column behind their DPS? Because that's a fine place. That's an okay place for them to be. My understanding is that he should be between the tank and the DPS columns. That's an okay place for them to be, but not necessarily ideal. Am I missing something? Yes. You're missing what I missed when I first started playing with Baloth. It's a rare situation, but I think people are learning to place Baloth just in case. Baloth is perfectly fine if he's between a tank and a DPS. But the ideal place for Baloth is as far back in the formation as they can go, as long as they're right behind the DPS. Why is that? Cause for celebration. Enemies killed by champions in the column ahead of or behind explode into magical paper confetti. This just means you need to be ahead of or behind the DPS. And then Morbid Excitement. All champions in the column in front of Baloth do more damage. So this means in front of or behind. So again, in front or behind the DPS. And then where people look at placement is down here. A champion in any column in front of Baloth takes damage. So what a lot of people misread about that is that they read a champion in the column in front of Baloth, and they think that the Baloth needs to be behind the tanks, and then your DPS goes behind them. But it says any column in front of them. So the actual best place to put Baloth all the way in the back, in case you get full party AoE, because then you're getting stacks for every party member that was in front of Baloth that took damage in that full party AoE situation. Now, it is totally fine for you to put Baloth where you're putting them, between the tank line and your DPS, if you want to set it up that way. In cases where you're not dealing with full party AoE, it's functioning the same way. You're getting stacks off the tank column. Just understand that it's actually most optimal in others. It's not any less optimal to put him behind the DPS and have the DPS anywhere else in the formation, because he's reading any column in front of him anyway. So he's still going to pick up that damage off the tank line. Obviously, all this changes with Warduke, but yeah. So that's why you might be putting them between the tank and the DPS. I did that for a long time, and then I realized, oh, that says any. And now I try to put him as far back as possible. See, this would be between, but ideally it's better up here, or better back here, in an AoE situation. Onyx Squared, if you forge an item during an event push, will it take favor from the event or randomly hit a campaign? It only ever takes Legendary Forge only ever takes favor from campaigns. Period. So it won't hit an event, it won't hit a time gate, it won't hit trials. Smoking, I now have 4 shiny potions. Use them. Should I use them? Yes. On speed champs. Oh. Or others. Can you suggest some items I should focus on, please? So yeah, generally speaking, the best place, like the most efficient place to use shinies is going to be Briv slot 4. Briv slot 4. If you don't, if you know, you either need it shiny, you need it gilded. So you either need it shiny or golden. The preference is golden, but if you don't have a golden potion, shiny it. And then the Human over here. Human's slot 4. So the eggs. These are the speed items that, generally speaking, you're dumping massive amounts of item levels into. The eggs are now capped, so you only have to get to shiny 16, 15. Brivs goes on forever and ever. We just got a new speed champion in the form of Virgil down here. Virgil. And Rapid Fire slot 5 is a speed item. It sucks up a lot of item levels though, so I wouldn't necessarily target this first unless you know you have the blacksmithing contracts and you want to max it out. It's kind of expensive at 1985 Epic Shiny. Human should be your first priority, I feel like, and then Briv. Another speed item that's going to max out is Sentry's slot 3. Sentry slot 3. That's 4. So yeah, speed. I feel like speed is a great place to start. Speed is where you should start, because speed's going to enable you to go very fast, but it's going to basically make your time playing Idle Champions more efficient, because you're going to complete more stuff faster. And if you shiny those item levels and then invest, you can't just shiny something and forget it. Because the shiny effect, the 50% modifier, is based on the power of the item, and item levels dictate the power of the item. So if you have a shiny level 8 item, you're getting, not exactly, but you're getting the equivalent of like 4 more item levels out of it. Well, that's not a big deal, right? And that's why doing it on these speed items matters so much. Excuse me, here we go. Because if it wasn't shiny, I'd have to put like over 3,000 item levels into this. And if Brivs wasn't golden, oh my god. It's at 36, 38. Can you imagine? Because golden is 100% more, so it'd be over 7,000. Oh, yeah. So yeah, for speed, those are great. Those are the ones I would look at. Human first. Drop one on Briv, again, if you don't have them there already. Virgil has one. Sentry has one. I'm seeing somebody yell Nahara at me. This is just damage, so that doesn't matter. I mean, for damage stuff, there's lots of places you could go. Again, Averin has... Averin's mirror image is huge. With shiny. It's kind of a big deal. Because this one can go out multiple times, so it gets a lot of good usage. Somebody's going to get mad at me if I don't mention Krond. Krond's hammer. If you're going to go all in on Krond, I would only shiny or golden this if you're going to go all in on Krond. Even though I have 600 item levels, I've not gone all in on Krond. You need to dump thousands of average item levels into Krond. If you're going to shiny the item, that means you're going to start dumping thousands in. I don't know if that's the most efficient way for people to play, but there's people that like that. It's not for new players, for sure. And the same with Artemis. Artemis's flute needs like 5 to 10,000 item levels, and you want it like shiny or golden, right? Those are like end game things. I don't recommend that for newer players, though. But you're looking for places that are going to most optimally use item levels, and capping items like speed items are generally the best place, I think, the best investment for them, because you're going to get a return on that investment, a big return on that investment as you invest more item levels into them, and as you start doing more speed runs for like gem farming, because you're going to earn more and more and more gems. Like, because I have that stuff shiny, I'm earning, I think I talked about this yesterday, I'm earning between 100 and 200,000 gems a day if I'm actively gem farming. And then I turn that back into chests, and those chests give me blacksmithing contracts, and then I can boost that stuff even more if it's not capped already, right? It's this return on investment and just maximizing potential that you're getting out of those situations. So I would say target speed champions first. Oh God, we're out of time. I didn't answer all the questions. Hold on. Lightning round, super fast lightning round, and then we're going to get out on a song. Smoking one. Should I be rushing through content to open Tiamat, or should I stop to open the last of the 4 patrons? You're talking about Zerial. Same thing. Completing the Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus storyline unlocks both Zerial and Trials of Mount Tiamat. TS Force, could you point out some really good cases, perhaps very uncommon or unexpected, for using Archon's usurped power? Unexpected Orkira stacking, boosting Orkira's healing by usurping the healing and make it bigger, and then having Artemis observe it and make it even bigger. That's the one that sticks out. Outside of that, it's just interesting shenanigans that don't really mean a whole lot, in my opinion. You can usurp the Yorvin's damage reduction, I believe, or Orion. Oh, you can usurp Freely's overwhelm boost of 5 and throw Archon's overwhelm like through the roof to the well over 100, which is all that matters. It's wild. Orion the Wise, War Duck DPS. Yes. How does it compare to others? It's okay. Just trying him now and already at E330. Well, you did better than I did. Yeah, I think it's developing. The issue I have with War Duck as a DPS is if they're in the tank column, they fall over pretty quickly. They don't really have any survivability features. Philistine, why is Frida's Bud consistently so low? Because she doesn't kill with her Bud. She kills with Hellish Rebuke. It's a problem with Farida. So her DPS numbers look low, but she can kill beyond that with Hellish Rebuke. So she can push beyond what her DPS her Bud looks like. Outside of that, it's just balance. And yeah, estimated DPS at the top left, don't look at that. Don't ever look. Base DPS is a lie. T5 Cats, if there's 2 enemies left, will Krull's abilities eventually kill one of them? Yeah, Trader should eventually kill one of them as long as you have the damage to kill, to do that. Yes. And last question, what would you think about adding a 7th equipment slot via feed or some other means? No, I don't think it's... I think we've talked about this before, and I think what it would be cool would be to have an artifact slot. And you have to hunt artifacts in dungeons or things, and they're rare drops, and then each person gets to equip an artifact, but you could put it anywhere. Like a different type of feat pool, but maybe a super more powerful. I think we've talked about that in the past as a community. I think that would be cool, but I think what we're going to end up with probably is more feat slots. That's everything, folks. If you enjoyed seeing these streams, they're going to be back next week, and that's it for the rest of the year. Next week is the final week for CNE streams. If you enjoyed me, you can come see me in about an hour-ish on my channel, twitch.tv/Gaarawarr. It's Final Fantasy Saturday. We're playing through Final Fantasy V. Come hang out with us. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to Martin for grabbing the questions. The song we're going out on, Celise's Soaking Away Regret. Enjoy.
Time away from phone. Did some good things and the battles were no joke. Think I settled in for the night with a book and a nice long soul. Gonna doff my armor and hang up my clothes. Take some time to run a whetstone down my blade. Wash the stains from my plate. Think of the choices I made. Raise a tear that I've come to the end of this day. Need some downtime to soothe the nerves I've been free. sinking further down, sliding back, walking memory lane, following my track. Those I lost, to those I must attack, remembering those that haunt me as I fade to black. Set that glass of whiskey down upon my sheet. Take a moment to recover